People ask what's the most important thing on the battlefield to make a decision. And I say the most important thing on the battlefield is to know where you're located, where you're at. And it's the same in life. If you don't take time to stop and reflect, then you truly don't know where you are and where you want to go. And they say, if you're going nowhere, all roads lead to it, and it'll take you down some bad freaking paths. But you have to stop, because if I asked, are you the same person you were a month ago? Your answer would be no. Rarely do people take the time to stop and reflect and say, hey, what are my weaknesses and strengths today? Am I still heading towards my goal? Or am I starting to veer off path? Yeah. What do I need to do to get back on? And it's just not a habitual practice that we teach children in education or higher education, of just taking that time, as you just said, to stop away and say, okay, hey, where am I currently located? Am I still on the right path? What do I need to do differently, or what do I need to continue?
Welcome to the On the Path podcast, a conversation on navigating life. Join Chris Coker and Colin Creech as they have honest conversations with fellow travelers on the path. In each episode, they explore the physical, mental, and spiritual health aspects of the whole self, striving for personal accountability and a strong community. Gain insights, learn from our mistakes, and hear from guests who have mastered these areas. Step on the path, embracing every challenge and success along the way. See you on the path.
Today on the path, we're sitting down with Mike Sarraille, a distinguished retired U.S. Navy SEAL officer and former enlisted Recon Marine and Scout Sniper. His illustrious journey from the battlefield to the boardroom embodies the epitome of leadership, resilience, and the entrepreneurial spirit. Mike's military career is nothing short of heroic. After enlisting in the Marine Corps and serving as a Recon Marine, he transitioned to the Navy SEALs, where he demonstrated exceptional leadership and valor. Serving in SEAL Team 3 Task Unit Bruiser, he played a pivotal role in the Battle of Ramadi in 2006, and later in the Battle of Sadr City. His tenure as the SEAL Junior Officer Training Course Director and his selection for the Naval Special Warfare Development Group underscores his commitment to excellence and mentorship. Mike's service is marked by a Silver Star, 6 Bronze Stars for Valor, 2 Defense Meritorious Service Medals, and a Purple Heart, showcasing his dedication to his country and fellow servicemen. His journey from a distinguished 20-year military career to a visionary leader in the business world is inspiring. After his retirement, Mike faced the daunting challenge of redefining his identity outside of the military, which is a transition that many veterans struggle to navigate. Through a period of personal struggle, he realized the importance of community, support, and his own resilience. His story is a testament to the power of overcoming adversity and harnessing one's experience to forge a new path. Today, Mike is the founder and CEO of Talent War Group, where he pioneered a new approach in executive search and talent advisory, focusing on identifying and nurturing high-performing leaders for pivotal roles in business. His insights into leadership and talent management are captured in his co-authored book, The Talent War: How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. Mike is also the host of the Everyday Warrior podcast, a series in partnership with Men's Journal. And he's also the author of the book, The Everyday Warrior, a no-hack practical approach to life. He's the founder of ATA, a mindset-driven apparel brand, and the founder of Legacy Expeditions, an organization dedicated to honoring the memory of our fallen and raising funds for charities like Folds of Honor. Now, join us on the path with Mike Sarraille. Mike Sarraille, first official guest on the Path podcast. We are stoked to have you, my man. Welcome to the Path.
Thank you.
And we have to say, and I have to say too, like I feel like I've known you a lot longer than we actually have, but I'm so grateful that you're in my life. I'm honestly, I've become a better person because of it. And thank you for being our first guest too.
Likewise. And I mean, I enjoyed having you on the podcast. It was the least downloaded podcast, but you got to start somewhere, man.
And that's, we'll see. That's a wrap.
So look, I want to dive right in. Obviously, talking to you a little bit before the show. It's not always for the faint-hearted. We want to go deep. We want to make sure we really get to know some people. So we're just going to dive right into it. And we were thinking about this before the show. Colin and I were talking. We wanted to know if you had a superpower, and that power was to go back in time, but you could only go back to next Thursday. What would you do different?
Last Thursday.
Yeah.
I would have definitely helped around the house with my wife to make sure that
this took a turn.
Yeah, that she wasn't as upset with me as she has been the last few days because I've had late work nights and she has a job too. And I'll tell you what, I don't always carry my load at home.
Yeah.
No.
So go home and clean the dishes from last Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's trash day. So with my brain, the amount of brain trauma, I've got to lock in memory system. And today is actually trash and recycle day. So if I don't take care of that before she gets home, it's
actually a reminder. I need to text my dad and ask him to bring my trash cans in. So thank you.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
But now for seriously diving in, to what Chris said, this podcast, we've already told the viewers about your bio, your background, incredibly impressive. And so we really want to know, to get to that next level of depth, what's one defining moment in your life that shaped who you are today?
I think every father has to say the birth of their children.
Yep.
And that is a defining moment. But, that's also the easy answer. It's got to be September 29th, 2006, a subject that I hate talking about, but I've got to realize is just part of my DNA at this point. And that's when lost one of my guys, Michael Mansour, who jumped on a grenade 3 feet from me to save myself and another SEAL. And talk about, I say often that my ego was killed on a rooftop in Ramadi, Iraq on September 29th, 2006. And still learning from him in death, just a remarkable human being. And it's a reminder, a constant reminder to live life to the fullest. And it does dampen, happy times where I'm overly happy. We've achieved something and I'm like, shit, Mikey's not here. And so, I think that's the burden that soldiers bear is the survivor's guilt, not coming home with their, with all their brothers and sisters in arms. And I don't think that's something you ever put down. Maybe the like stones in a backpack, maybe they become a little lighter, but that has to be the defining moment. And I don't, regardless of what I do in the future, I think that will always be the defining moment in my life. And it also makes you question of, could I have gotten to the grenade quicker? Was I the better man? Clearly not. He was selfless. And if you know that man, it's just a testament to his character and the way he was raised and into his family, who are just good Americans who never asked for anything. And they still had children that went on to serve after Mikey was killed.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. That's a phenomenal story to hear. And there's just so much there that, to kind of dive into. And I'm thinking about one of the last scenes in Saving Private Ryan, the commanding officer, the role that Tom Hanks plays. He dies and Private Ryan's looking at him, right? And he says, earn it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about that now. And I'm just curious with you, how obviously you're excelling now, you're living a good life. You seem happy and you're earning it. And I wonder what role some of the experiences like that one, how do you use that to kind of keep you moving in the positive and intentional direction that you want to be moving in your life?
It's a solemn reminder to do more, to go harder, to go faster. And sometimes not all my movement is effective or efficient, but ultimately whether I earn it or not is for his family and others to decide. It's almost like saying, hey, do you think you're a good leader? That's not for me to determine. That's for other people to determine. And the same thing, I'm just going to keep doing things with the right intent. Even though you have the right intent, sometimes they don't always go the direction that you want. Relationships are ruined. But no, I'm just going to keep moving. And I think Idle hands are the devil's work.
Dang, Skippy.
I just, when I slow down, that's when things become the hardest. And a good friend recently said, the mind or the voice in your head is the most powerful voice in the world, for better or for worse. And so if I'm not moving, that's when that voice starts talking. And quite frankly, for people that follow me, it seems like I'm everywhere or doing things just left and right. And you know me, and I am. Yeah. And I think my wisest counsel now is my wife, Jordan. And she's like, hey, at some point you got to slow down. Yeah. And it may be, part of it is movement and compartmentalizing things just helps me avoid having to confront some of the harsh realities of what we went through in life. I don't care if you were on the battlefield or not. Yeah. People have hardships. And especially with men, I think we're awful with emotions. We're good at compartmentalizing, but you can't compartmentalize forever. And I mean, this is the same reason we are a few days away from going to Rhythmia Resort, Costa Rica. John Wellborn, NFL athlete, Sanjay Ribeiro, who won the world championships in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu multiple times over, to try something that's outside of a modality that we consider routine, ayahuasca. Yeah. And I've heard, and you've been through it, that it forces you to confront things that you don't want to confront. And I couldn't think of a better way to start 2024. Yeah. And we're going to do a short documentary on it, led by Will over there, recording this thing. And Mark Pattison, who's also played in the NFL and climbed all 7 summits.
It changed my life forever, specifically that place. And I think what I love about it too is it's unique for everybody that goes too. I don't think anybody has the same experience because nobody goes in there with the same background, the same troubles, whatever their reason for being there. And I think one of the intentions they recommend for the first evening is show me who I've become. And I think that can be a lot, but also it can be very informative. I think it helps you make sense of a lot of those things in your life. We, on the Path podcast, we talk about, we view life as like the path. And I think it helped me make a lot of sense of how did I get here? And then where am I going from here? Something you mentioned in your book too, was the progress over perfection, because yes, you are always moving. You try and get things, I love the term of getting it to like 80% and then going. 80 is gravy. How do you kind of apply that to your life? Because you're doing it, but like, what is good enough to go look like for you? Progress over perfection, because nothing's ever perfect when we really be honest with ourselves.
Yeah. My time in service in special operations really honed that. I had a leader once say, and he got fired on that deployment, that God was, we accept nothing less than perfect in this unit. And it automatically hit me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have a rough time here. To come into the Marines, I think I was a whopping 135. Nothing came easy to me. It never has through my life. So I think I've come to the point where, hey, if you're moving 1 foot forward every day, and there are days you move 3 steps back, then that's fine. So, I mean, hence the title of VADA is, or the motto is 1 step at a time. I've come to embrace that. And especially with regards to special operations is you never had a complete intelligence picture of what was going on the battlefield. Yep. You were sometimes only armed with 50% of the information, and you've got to make a decision, a decisive decision, and you got to move your guys, and they've got to be aligned to what you're trying to achieve. And sometimes when you only have 50% of the situational awareness, you're going to make bad decisions, but that's not the end of the world. It's, hey, simply, it wasn't the right decision. Hey, let's reset. We're going to move in this direction. And those that keep on moving, General Patton said the quote, and I'm saying it to you guys, a bad plan executed now is better than a good plan executed tomorrow.
That's right.
Is take the initiative, and on the way, you're going to gain more information to bring to your awareness whether it was a good decision or not. Now, when lives are on the line, that's different. And I think with experience, more battlefield experience in life, that's called wisdom. The superpower of aging is if you've reflected over time, if you're somebody who values sort of going through that reflection or that personal debrief, and you know your strengths and weaknesses, it becomes wisdom, and you start to make better decisions. Not all human beings are like that.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it actually makes me think that, take action, right? Decisive action. But at the same time, you have to have that wisdom you can fall back on to make sure that you're not straying too far off the left and the right limit, right? You're taking action, but there's still a degree of, you don't want to completely derail, right? So I imagine, I'm not trying to lead the witness here, but you mentioned self-reflection. So I imagine that's a part of the process, but I'm curious, like, move, make progress in whatever it is, make that decisive action, but also balance that with some reflection to make sure that you're still moving generally in the direction you're moving towards. So I guess the question for you, Mike, is really around, how do you put those guardrails up? You want to move forward. How do you put the guardrails up to make sure that you're not going too far that way?
Honestly, I'm going to say my team. For me now, it's you guys, especially my wife, the team, regardless of what I'm doing. It was either my team in the Recon community, the SEAL community, my business team now, is as I sort of progress. And Will, you can back me up here. Like, even Carly, who's one of my partners, said, "Hey, you're a visionary, and we don't need you to be an operator anymore." And I will have a new idea every day.
Yeah.
I get those texts every day.
Yes. And say, hey, we need to do this. And it's like, hey, let's focus on the two things that we've laid out for this month. So is having, you've got to look at the people around you as your brain trust. Everyone comes with different perspectives, different experiences, and they're a sounding board.
Yeah.
They're a sounding board for, hey, in theory, that's a great, idea. However, given timing, whatever it may be, or that we're so focused on this initiative, we need to shelf that. And sometimes, even though I get, and this is a weakness, I get no's, I'm like, hey, we're doing it anyways. And, back to your point, failure is one of the most beautiful things in life. Failure, and if you ask somebody who your greatest mentor is, they'll say, oh, well, General Patton or this person. Failure has been my greatest mentor.
Yeah.
And sometimes knowing what not to do is as valuable as knowing what to do.
Yeah.
So with each failure I've had in life, and there's I could fill 5 Bibles worth of my failures, you then stumble onto an experience later in life and say, well, actually, a lot of common threads to the situation in my past. I know this is definitely not the course given what happened in the past, or given what happened in the past, I need to approach these things differently. Variables are different. And it arms me to make better decisions as I get older. So as people complain about aging, I actually smile. Like this, and it always, the hindsight is 2020. Man, if I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self, don't do this, stay away from that girl, it'd be great. But I smile. And the thing about failure too is it's not an indictment of your character. It just means you're human.
Yeah.
Now, what you do with failure, whether you demonstrate resiliency or you become a victim and stay down, that's what's going to determine the quality of your life. And I mean, you look at every success story and nobody ever hears about the failures. They just see that Elon Musk has become so wildly, wealthy and successful. But if you look back at his life, there are 1,000 failures. And actually, let me tell you this one. You guys have heard of Operation Eagle Claw, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The failed hostage rescue attempt to rescue the 52 Americans that were taken hostage in Tehran. Well, that was Delta Force's first operation. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to interview General Jerry Boykin, who's a phenomenal leader, and I actually wrote about him in my book, The Talent War. Those guys were devastated. That was their first major operation. You could call it their proof of concept to prove their worth. And it became a watershed moment in special operations history, from which JSOC, SOCOM were formed. And we still utilize lessons from that operation that are still relevant in special operations in the military today. And Delta's probably, and not that I was part of Delta, but they've probably failed 1,000 times to become one of the premier counterterrorism units in the world. They know that it is the mechanism through which we learn and we grow and we get better.
Yeah. And I think that's important part of in the military, the after actions review, but something that Chris called out when he was reading The Everyday Warrior, your book, was reflect on what went wrong, even if it's painful. And that's what, that's like the part of basically what you were saying is it's not always going to be the fun reflection. Like, how awesome was that evening? We got to do this. We saw so-and-so. And sometimes it's like, how bad did I mess up? And,
it's the
and
failures.
what can I do different?
It's the failures. And it also is a testament to, I'll acknowledge you for a second here, the intestinal fortitude it takes to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I messed up here, here, and here, but I'm going to use that and I'm going to grow from it. And actually, it resonates a lot. It hits me in the core that, that if I could go back and tell because now I've got, I've got kids myself. One of them is 14 now. And my new mantra with my 14-year-old, I tell him, I said, man, if I could put my mind in I said, you have the gift of youth. If I could put my mind in your body, the sky's the limit. You've got this extra runway. And I think a lot of that comes from the humility to not only say it to yourself, but you're sitting here telling us like, oh, I failed here. I've done this, I've done that, but to be able to do that. But I think it's a critical part of the growth process.
I guess
some things you have to learn on your own. My folks, I consider myself blessed. I had great folks, loving folks. I was a wild child, which is a common thread amongst most that joined the military. And I just didn't want to listen. Even at 18, I didn't want to listen. I enlisted in the Marine Corps shortly after that. And it wasn't until I finished boot camp where my old man and I reconnected. He saw a different person.
Yeah.
And my dad and both my mom, different forms of mentorship. My mom is on the emotional, spiritual side. My dad is sort of on the, I'd say being a man side, business leader side.
Yeah.
They still are, alongside my wife, some of the most valued mentors. Mm-hmm. And my dad started his own company. He did extremely well. He had a lot of mistakes. He'll see me do something and he'll call him like, hey, don't do that again. But life is, some people just need to screw it up on their own to come back and say, hey, you know what, Dad, you were right.
Yeah.
I tried.
Hard knocks.
Yeah.
I think my dad hears that a little too often, but I've been very fortunate to pretty much always learn the hard way.
Yeah.
I guess, you've mentioned it a few times and even, I hope you do get all those dishes done tonight, but how do you maintain the balance? You do have an amazing wife. I've been honored to meet her, but how do you maintain that balance between, this incredible professional career that you're working on growing and continue to grow, but also that personal side and your well-being and also that relationship?
To be honest, in the book, The Everyday Warrior, a lot of those lessons that we instilled in the book were from amazing men that I served with.
Yeah.
And just that were such high performers at a level that I couldn't achieve. And I don't want the readers to think like, here's this guy that puts these all into practice. I have put them into practice at points in my life, but I get out of balance. And I will always put my personal balance, emotional and spiritually, especially, and sometimes physically, to the wayside to maintain the pace that I'm maintaining.
Yeah.
Balance it's almost like perfection. Will you ever be 100% balanced? Can you ever achieve perfection? No.
Yeah.
And there are just moments in my life where I get close to some semblance of balance, and then others that I'm completely out of balance, especially, for for entrepreneurs listening. A great mentor said you can choose three things as an entrepreneur.
Didn't you tell me this morning?
One,
yeah.
You've got to choose the business.
Yeah.
Two, if you got a family, that's got to be number two. And most likely, three is your health.
Yeah.
In relationships, long-term relationships like your friends or your tribe, sometimes suffer, but they also understand that you're starting a business. And so, I'm also only 5 years retired and I've got a lot of spaghetti against the wall and some of those strings are going to fall off. I just don't know which ones yet. And so I'm still on that journey of saying, okay, hey, these are the things I love, but it's life. They don't produce revenue. They don't put food on the table. It's not going to pay for my kids' college. So as much as I love doing it, that's now a hobby. Do it when you can. And focus on these core businesses that produce revenue. I'm not trying to become famous. I would rather be renowned than famous. I'm not trying to become wealthy, though I won't turn away money. Impact and purpose are what drive me. And there's nothing like getting a message on LinkedIn from somebody that Philippe reached out from Miami. He's like, hey, your book, like it's become my Bible. And in that right there, I'm like, dude, thank you. I don't know what to say to that. And all I did say was, hey, I'm on this journey with you.
Yeah.
So this path.
That's right. That's right.
So that means a lot. And though I would love some consistency in revenue, I think that would take some of the anxiety off the plate. But we are having a lot of fun. We are having a ton of fun doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's just now putting a repeatable, systematic process behind it that it can become a business and continue to drive purpose and impact.
I love what you said. I don't want to be famous, I want to be renowned. I think that's huge. So generally it seems very much like, obviously I know you, but you're moving in the direction you want to be moving. I want to unpack a little bit, you were talking about, I completely agree, by the way, the balance is not a thing. It's more of just understanding how to make sure that the glass balls don't drop, right? Like you're juggling balls, some of them are rubber. Those ones are okay, but there's a few that can't drop. When we're talking about kind of the whole self, right? The physical, the spiritual, the mental, these other things, sometimes those do have to take a back seat. They're still a critical part of your overall well-being, right? So I'm curious to understand, what do you look out for to make sure that you don't let it go for too long, right? Like sometimes the business needs to take the front seat and you put it there. But then I imagine along the way in your life, you're thinking, okay, physical, like I got to get up, I got to move my body, I got to eat right, these kinds of things. So are there like, I guess, watch outs for you that about yourself? Like, all right, we're at this point, I need to self-regulate and kind of correct the azimuth a little bit.
I think that voice in my head, definitely, I know when I'm starting to feel the pressure. The best sort of scenario I can give you is towards the end of my military career, I was going through a divorce. I was at the peak fitness. I showed you guys a picture that will never go public.
I did not know that. Were you?
Probably the peak of my physicality in my life, but I was also but mentally and spiritually bereft. So I was so laser focused on my career within special operations and bringing the fight to the enemy and my guys, that my real family was really my second family and the job was my first family. And there is part of that community that's just also a reality. I spent proportionally way much more time with my guys deployed or on the road training than I did with my kids. And going through the divorce, all of a sudden I left that command, end up in Austin, which ended up being my last tour, from which I retired. And I lost my tribe. I lost my support network. I was struggling because the question was, who am I now if I'm not a traditional warrior? And somebody explained about the everyday warrior concept. But there was 2 years where I was drinking so heavily, partying so heavily, just doing, just harming actions that were harming me, that it took a good man and a good woman, my wife and Dr. Chris Free, who's got a book coming out called Operator Syndrome, who's helped free of charge, given so much of his time to people within our community to help them get back to health. I'm one of them. He was at my wedding. And when I pulled out of that, it was sort of a promise never to let that happen again. Yeah. Because I focused so much on one thing that I neglected everything else in my life. And I'm balancing it a little better now, of knowing when to break away for the kids, knowing when to break away for the wife. But it does take my wife to say, hey, no phones, put the phone down. You can wait until the morning. It's usually Colin texting me about, I need some code from GoDaddy.
Your number is on the account. I don't know what you want from me. But I think with what you said, and something we hear from a lot in our community, not just, I would say for, with men, is, I've made too many mistakes. I can't go back, or I can't fix it now. Like, how did you, obviously you had amazing people that helped you, but how do you move past it? Because sometimes, now you're only a day from that version of you. Now you're 2 days, like it's right behind you. How do you continue to move forward just yourself? Having a healthy community, yes, but how do you keep doing it? Because that regret sometimes just pulls us back into that mess.
There's a lot of regret, especially I think my worst regret is relationships. And, the only unit of measure that really matters in life is time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one unit of measurement that matters. And I mean, Colin, I've 2 relationships went to the wayside, partners recently. And I've even texted Colin saying, hey, where did I go wrong here? Because it takes you, when a relationship falls out of whack, there's 2 sides to it. And I'm not one to just say, hey, excuse my language, F that guy. I won't say it, so F that guy. It's where was I complicit in the breakdown of this relationship? Yeah. And that's what hurts the most. Where I'm going with that is sometimes you just got to let time sort of space that out and then choose the timing to go back and try to make things right. And some things you just can't make right. And you can dwell on it, or you can just keep moving forward with the knowledge of not doing what you did in the past.
Yeah.
And, time is precious and it's finite. I'll find the right time to repair those relationships when I think it's there.
I think we both appreciate the Stoics too. And I think a lot of what you're saying and at the end of the day, there's just so much we don't have control over. But what you're saying and what I'm hearing too is the part of like, I can control myself. So, I can reflect on it. How can I do it different? But at the same time, we can't control that other person and their actions, their behaviors. And maybe it is all your fault, or maybe it's all their fault. But at the end of the day, okay, what can I do with myself is, I think, an important thing that I try and remember for me. Sometimes when things are wild, but what can I really control is my actions and my behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just to say it a little differently, I wondered, does it even matter, right? Is it my fault? Is it the other person's fault? The current circumstance is the current circumstance. We can think about the actions that led to it. But like pointing blame never gets us anywhere. I think that holds us in a spot that we don't want to be, versus just saying, to your point, here we are. Now I'm in control of me. How am I going to move forward from this point? Instead of saying like, I should have done this different. Like there's a part of that, right? But when you start blaming, right, then suddenly you're not moving forward.
So pointing fingers and casting blame is the easy thing to do.
Yep.
Or if you're in a bad situation, saying it shouldn't be this way. In a firefight, when you're surrounded or you're pinned down, you could definitely say, like, it shouldn't be this way and blah, 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 blah. Great. That's not going to solve the problem. So, ultimately, you've got to move.
Yeah.
And just, especially with these, it's what could I have done differently? Learning from it, reflecting on it, and saying, okay, if I end up in this situation again, I can handle this differently in this way. And I mean, there's a lot of times we keep making the same mistake over and over again. And sometimes that's just life. You need to make it 2, 3, 4, 5 times until you recognize, okay, I am a big part of the problem here. Yeah. So how am I going to change this? And actually putting measures in place to ensure that you stop repeating that same mistake. But the victimhood mentality, which is pointing fingers and casting blame, because you have so much, I have so little. It's an epidemic, and victims tend to gravitate towards victims because that's all they do. And you see it, you see it even in politics, is people play to that mantra, and even veterans to a degree, because the media says we're broken. Some veterans just easily go into that sort of pillar and say, well, it's not my fault. I'm not going to work hard, and I'm just going to collect from the VA and not re-engage in society. And I'm not casting judgment, man. I'm not. Everyone has obstacles. Everyone's dealing with something. I know you guys are. I am. But I'm just not going to sit on the couch and do nothing about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's we all fight in our own arenas, right? Daring Greatly is one of well, first of all, obviously everybody's very familiar with the order himself, but the book Daring Greatly is just phenomenal. And when I read that the first time, we all fight in our own arenas, that just kind of struck me, right? Like, I have my experiences, you have yours. There's the things in your life that you have dealt with that you find difficult. Irrespective of what those things are to you, have no bearing on the difficult things in my life, right? You know what I mean? Like it's somebody that seems to have a very cushy life. Small pet peeve of mine is when you see like a wildly famous and wealthy person and I don't know, they're going through a divorce. And you're like, oh, why are they so sad? They still have all their money. They are allowed to fight in their own arena. They are allowed to deal with the stuff that they have to deal with. And I think that goes back to kind of that internal locus of control where all we own is this right here. We know what to do with ourselves and how we want to operate and view the world, operate in the world and view the world. And we're not going to be able to dictate the choices and decisions. To your point, Colin, you said earlier, we can't dictate the decision making that other people make, you know?
And I think that's where, you and I have spoken so much. And I think one thing we also, I love about you, you can say whatever you want about me, just playing, I know you love me, is
great.
Is that we also have different strengths, and I think that's where you were talking about community and how important it is. And I think that's, for me, been so impactful of, having individuals like you in my life, because we aren't going to have all the answers. And we're also not going to have all the abilities or the experiences to tackle every problem. And so sometimes you were talking about the community that helped you get out of that dark place. That's okay to ask for help is something that I think I've learned a lot too on this journey that I've been on in this path. I guess I wonder for you too, as you look back, you had this military career that was incredibly impressive.
Did you say progressive?
This is very progressive.
We've heard some stories. It was probably progressive.
We know where your mind's at right now.
Thank you. Can we focus? But no, it is an incredibly impressive career. And also what you're working on outside is incredibly impressive as well to me. And as you talked about a little bit about, we've talked before about what you're remembered for, but we're not there yet. We're all in this room. We're all still here. So when I think about that and you're moving forward, what are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? What are the priorities for you when it comes to your whole self, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, because you've got all these experiences, you've learned a lot, and you now have more information than you did yesterday. So what are you going to do today and tomorrow that's different?
Well, first off, I appreciate your comments on things I've been a part of. But if you look at the common denominator, it's team. Like all my successes have been with a team, from the 777 to the SEALs to the businesses. Team is part of my DNA. Like I could have written these books by myself, but I went out and did them with friends, because when you're in that journey, they give you different perspectives. It helps the learning and growth. And I'll continue to be that way. Funny enough, we did the 777, which we set 4 world records, and nobody really gave a rat's ass about the world records. We went on Fox and Friends, and it was everyone who was on the expedition. And it was a good feeling. We're there together. And then we got wasted in New York. But we were already sleep deprived, so it took like a whopping 1 beer for everyone to get drunk. And then 1 month later, I ended up back there to promote the book, Everyday Warrior, on Fox and Friends. And it hit number 84 of all books. And I'm sitting in the hotel room. I can't remember what hotel. It's near Times Square, because that's real close to the Fox studios. And Jordan, my wife's like, "Oh my God, like, this is amazing." She's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, it feels wrong. I'm here by myself. Like I would have rather had a team around me for this to share the moment. But what I'm doing now, when I had my hip replacement, I was in good shape. I did a Men's Journal photo shoot like the week before, and then right into to surgery. And things have never quite been the same. When I had the hip replaced, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, my right hip actually, it was masking the pain. I'm like, oh crap. And the doc's like, yeah, you probably got to replace that as well. And then all of a sudden my right shoulder went out of whack, my right knee. And so one of my focuses this year is to really focus on physical, spiritual, and mental health, primarily the physical, to get back to where I was, and really balancing out my time, and the power of saying no. And I'm getting better about that. A lot of people are like, "Oh, would you come speak for free to my company?" And my wife basically said, "No, you're not doing that anymore." Military unit asks, I'll do it. Just did it for the 27th Fighter Squadron out in Langley. Awesome Americans, and they fly the F-22 Raptor, which I never could have.
So cool. Yeah, it's cool.
So saying no and making sure that I'm using my time wisely, but I've got to get back to the health I was. That for me, that is part of my identity. And if you ask me right now, am I happy with I'm at physically? No, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing I'll call out for everybody listening, obviously, Colin, you and I have talked about it a ton. Everybody listening, you're going to come to find out this is going to be a recurring theme. The interconnectedness of what you just said too, right? Physicality, the mental aspect of it, the emotional, the spiritual, all this stuff is connected. You emphasize the physical piece. I strongly believe that when you start diving back into that, everything else is going to get more in line too, right? Get your body right, get your mind right. That's exactly how it works. Yeah. And so I think, all of these things, and for you, it's just that's kind of the driver. So I guess what I want to tell the listeners out there, it's you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You don't have to solve every aspect of your person all at once, but just have the confidence to know that if you put focus in one area, a lot of these other things kind of fall in line. And I think, I guess the one caveat I'll make is also the self-reflection it takes for you to acknowledge, like, all right, that's what it is. I'm going to focus on these things because I feel like there's an opportunity for me to kind of do a little retooling and workshopping on myself, and that's what it's going to be. So just a call to action for everybody listening is to think about that. There's a point in the book. It's one of my, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's one of my favorite spots in the Everyday Warrior. It's the OODA loop between rest and self-reflection, right? You have to take a pause, because when you take a pause, it creates space to do a little bit of self-reflection. And when you're doing self-reflection, you can then actually think inside and go, okay, I need to take a break, or I need to focus in these areas. So that's kind of this, this OODA loop, I think, that you're living into.
In the practice you brought up, the after-action review, it is mandatory, not optional in the military. After every training event, after every combat mission, we would stop, come together. Sometimes it was, 1 hour debriefs, 3 hour debriefs, even when we were successful. But if you do not take that period, you just, jump right back into activity, which I've been guilty of. You rob yourself of learning and growth of, even if I was successful, what made that successful? Let's do more of that. What is it? Start, stop, continue.
That's right.
Let's stop doing these things that continually result in failure. Let's continue these good practices that have become habitual in your life. And over here, there's a void. So we need to start doing this here. So start, stop, continue. But, again, another story is I used reflection when it came to my job in special operations. And, I was fortunate to make it to the tier 1 level, but I stopped doing it spiritually and mentally. And that's when things got out of whack. And I was going for about 2 years until I finally, again, left my unit, ended up by myself. And I'm like, okay, I'm way out of balance. And what did I do? Covered it up with alcohol, parties, and other things.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And so one of the still the same question, but I encourage everybody to listen and think about that too. What are you working on to do that? Have you kind of gone through that mental AAR of the start, stop, continue? These are the things that you're firing on all cylinders. You're doing really well. And then you have these other areas where maybe it's not. And how can you work on that?
And I think what you said earlier, it's a juggling act. It's a balancing act. It's never perfect. Progress over perfection, because I think I was always looking for a perfect time in my life a year ago or 2 years ago, and I never found it, because it also doesn't exist. And it's that balancing act. And I think something we talk about a lot is just gratitude, because you're here right now. We're present. We're in the studio. Yeah, that's right. We got Will here, who's literally the best, and we've got this awesome group of individuals.
He's all right.
He's literally the best.
I keep my people down. I keep one foot on them.
That's not true, everybody. That's not true. Will, just talk to me afterwards if you need to get something out there. But,
report to HR. There is, one thing in the chapter, know thyself. People ask what's the most important thing on the battlefield to make a decision. And I say the most important thing on the battlefield is to know where you're located, where you're at. And it's the same in life. If you don't take time to stop and reflect, then you truly don't know where you are and where you want to go. And they say, if you're going nowhere, all roads lead to it, and it'll take you down some bad freaking paths. But you have to stop, because if I asked, are you the same person you were a month ago? Your answer would be no. Rarely do people take the time to stop and reflect and say, hey, what are my weaknesses and strengths today? Am I still heading towards my goal? Or am I starting to veer off path? What do I need to do to get back on? And it's just not a habitual practice that we teach children in education or higher education, of just taking that time, as you just said, to stop away and say, okay, hey, where am I currently located? Am I still on the right path? What do I need to do differently, or what do I need to continue?
Yeah.
And so you need to know where you're located. And people just, I would say probably 90% of humans just don't do that.
Yeah.
Or they may be doing it informally and they don't know, but not to an extent that's actually providing them data on what needs to be the next step.
And I think that's for us, the reason for the Path podcast is because we view life as this path. And sometimes you take these side adventures and you get off the path, and it's always, how can you get back on? And you gave us a lot of amazing insights today on failure, but also how you got back on track with either community or healthy habits. And I think something that always sticks with me is that progress over perfection. It's never perfect. But Chris, anything else you'd add to that?
No, I think this has been stellar. Well, thank you. Going back to the gratitude piece. Thank you, Mike. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm certain it's the first of several. So very much looking forward to seeing you on the path along the way. Mm-hmm. And before we wrap up, I'd be remiss. I'd love to give you a chance to just kind of what's going on in your life that you want people to know about. Make sure that people know where to find you. If this is the first time somebody's heard of you and they want to get to know you more after this story, where can they go to find you?
Yeah, one of the worst moments of my life is when my media team's like, hey, you need a website. And so we built MikeSarraille.com, which F my life.
It's a great
modesty,
website.
Zero, hopefully high in humility. But on there, you'll find that, one, we have Talent War Group, which is a leadership consulting, business consulting, and executive search firm. It's my passion. I love working with organizations from law enforcement to traditional businesses to sports teams on leadership culture, high-performing teams. We've got Legacy Expeditions, which we got some big announcements coming out this year. Some great expeditions coming up. And then Men's Journal, Everyday Warrior.
That's right. Cannot think of a better way to wrap it up. So everybody out there, you know where to find him. Go look him up. Make sure you stay in touch. And we'll see you on the path.
See you on the path.
Thanks, guys.